I was on the floor of our storage room, holding my husband's navy blue jacket, the one he wore every time we traveled, when I pressed it to my face and realized it barely smelled like him anymore. That's what grief does. It doesn't just take the person. It chips away at them. The scent on old fabric. The sound of their voice, growing softer every month until one day you're straining to hear it at all. My name is Natalie Carter. 6 months after my husband Daniel died of a sudden heart attack at 51, I was kneeling in that storage room when I heard something that changed everything. His voice. Coming from his old phone, the one I'd thrown in a box on the worst day of my life because I couldn't face looking at it. The screen had somehow turned on. An audio file was playing. I grabbed it and pressed it to my ear. If you're hearing this, it means I never found the courage to tell you myself. The room seemed to shrink around me. Recorded 3 days before his death. 3 days before I kissed him goodbye in the kitchen doorway. 3 days before everything ended without warning. His voice dropped lower. Natalie, if you're listening to this, there's something I should have told you a long time ago. Then it stopped. The audio showed 1 minute 41 seconds. Only 40 seconds had played. I pressed play again. Same result. Over a minute of Daniel's voice, gone. Here's the thing. Daniel hated voice notes. Whenever our daughter Maya sent one, he'd groan, "Just type it, she has thumbs." So why had he recorded this? Why had he never sent it? And what was he too afraid to say? I spent the next morning trying every recovery app one could find. One eventually unlocked a few more seconds of damaged audio. Daniel's voice returned, softer. Emotional. Natalie, there's something about grace that you never knew. Then silence. Grace. I had no grace in my life. Not a relative, not a neighbor, not a coworker. I went through 17 years of memories and came up with nothing. But Daniel hadn't said the name like she was a stranger. He said it like I should already know exactly who she was. That terrified me more than anything. I opened Daniel's phone for the first time since his death. Our wedding anniversary, his passcode on every device, never changed. I'd teased him about it for years. Standing there with that phone, it didn't feel predictable anymore. It felt like a door I wasn't meant to open. The contacts looked normal at first. Family. Friends. Co-workers. He had his dentist saved as Dr. Painful. His neighbor as Jim next door. Daniel labeled everything. Then I saw it. One contact. A single letter. G. No last name. No photo. Nothing else. I tapped it. Dozens of calls. I kept scrolling. More months. More years. The history stretched back nearly a decade, 10 years of phone calls, every single month. No texts. No emails. Just calls, as if everything else had been deliberately erased. I checked the dates. Calls during our trip to Portugal. During Maya's school play. During the week of my mother's surgery, when Daniel held my hand in the waiting room and told me everything would be okay. All while keeping a secret decade-long relationship with someone saved under a single letter. At the bottom of the contact page was a small note. 6 words. Don't forget the monthly transfer. Monthly transfer of what? I walked through the next 2 days like a ghost. Made dinner. Drove Maya around. Smiled when I was supposed to smile. Inside, I was picking at a wound I couldn't stop touching. Maya found me at midnight staring into an open fridge. Mom. You okay? I smiled the way mothers learn to smile when they're not. Just couldn't sleep. She went upstairs. And I stood there thinking about how many times Daniel might have had that same conversation with me. Performing normalcy while an entire secret life hummed underneath. I went to Daniel's office downtown. Olivia, his assistant of 12 years, had cried at the funeral. Sent flowers. Written a card calling him the best boss she'd ever had. When she appeared in the hallway and saw my expression, something crossed her face. Fast. A flicker she immediately controlled. Fear. She led me to Daniel's old office and removed a sealed manila envelope from the filing cabinet. My name in Daniel's handwriting on the front. Daniel left instructions. If anything happened to him, I was supposed to give you this. At the door I stopped. You knew, didn't you? She looked at the floor. Whatever's inside. Daniel thought he was protecting someone. Not himself. Not us. Someone else. I sat at the kitchen table for 30 minutes before opening it. Bank records. Transfer receipts. Financial statements. Monthly payments. 10 years. Thousands of dollars each time. Every payment sent to the same name. Grace Holloway. I found the address. A town 3 states away. I checked his travel records. He had never been there. Not once. Not a single flight. Not one hotel booking. If she was what I suspected, how had they maintained anything for 10 years without ever being in the same place? Unless she wasn't what I suspected. I drove 6 hours alone without telling anyone where I was going. The town was small. Quiet in the way that feels permanent. The GPS led me to a white house near the water. Paint peeling. Nothing suggesting comfort. Just survival. She came onto the porch before I reached the steps. Mid-50s. Gray streaks in dark hair. Eyes that had seen a lot of difficult things and were tired of seeing them. Are you Grace Holloway? Yes. My name is Natalie Carter. I'm Daniel's wife. The color left her face instantly. Her hand flew to her mouth. Tears appeared, not gradually, they just appeared, like they'd been waiting for years. I had prepared myself for anger. For guilt. Maybe defiance. Not grief. Raw, unmistakable grief. Finally, barely a whisper, he's really gone. For 6 months. She pressed both hands over her face. Why was he sending you money, Grace? She went inside without answering. When she returned, she was holding a photograph. Daniel, younger, maybe 30, standing beside his brother Ryan. Behind them, caught in the background, a wrecked car. Twisted metal. A crash scene at night. That's where everything started. Ryan Carter. I knew Daniel's younger brother had died before we met. A car accident, that was all anyone had ever offered. Now I understood why. Because that was all had always been a choice. The next morning I went to see Daniel's mother, Elaine. We sat in her kitchen making small talk until I placed the photograph on the table. The smile left her face. Her teacup rattled so hard she had to set it down. Where did you get this? From Grace Holloway. That woman. 2 words. Years of bitterness packed inside them. Elaine. What happened? She walked to the window. Some things should stay buried. Before I left, Daniel spent 10 years on this. Whatever it is, it's already out of the ground. She said nothing. But I kept thinking about the fear in her voice. Not grief. Not anger. Fear. Which meant this wasn't just about a tragedy. It was about something that still frightened people, 14 years later. I tracked down the official police report on Ryan's accident. Grace Holloway listed as the other driver. Ryan's vehicle crossing into oncoming traffic. Alcohol impairment suggested. Clean. Neat. Too neat. Then I found the missing pages. Page 12. 14. 15. Simply gone, not misfiled, not corrupted. Removed. And the witness statements that followed had no signatures, no names, no transcripts. The kind of documentation that looks complete from a distance and falls apart under examination. Accident investigations don't lose pages. Unless someone needed them to disappear. My phone rang. Unknown number. Stop looking into Ryan. Everything in my body went cold. Some stories end for a reason. The line went dead. Whoever called knew my name, my number, and exactly what I was doing. For 2 days I almost stopped. Daniel was gone. I had a daughter. A life. But I kept hearing his voice. If you're hearing this, it means I never found the courage to tell you myself. He died without that courage. I wasn't willing to follow him. I found the key cleaning Daniel's home office. Bottom drawer, slightly off-center. A small hidden panel in the back. Behind it, one key on a faded tag. Unit 318. A storage facility 40 minutes outside the city. He'd been renting it, the manager confirmed, for 10 years. What was inside stopped my breath. It didn't look like storage. It looked like the inside of someone's obsession. Shelves floor to ceiling. Boxes labeled by year. Binders. Audio recordings. Hard drives. Documents stacked everywhere. On the back wall, a bulletin board covered in newspaper clippings, court filings, photographs, maps, and notes in Daniel's handwriting, precise, organized, relentless. 17 years of marriage. And I had never been inside this room. Not once. In a small locked metal box beneath the board, key taped underneath, was a digital recorder. Labeled, "Play if I'm gone." I pressed play. Natalie. His voice. Older than I remembered. Exhausted. The voice of a man who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time. I need you to understand something. Ryan wasn't supposed to die. Not, Ryan made a mistake. Not, it was a terrible accident. Ryan wasn't supposed to die. Grace was never responsible. The problem started before that night. The problem is something I should have exposed years ago. His voice cracked. Then he said a name. His father's name. Richard. And the file ended. I worked through the storage unit for hours. And I found it, one page, highlighted in yellow. Ryan discovered the fraud 3 weeks before the crash. Ryan had been helping Richard manage the business. While reviewing company records, he found evidence of massive financial misconduct. Money funneled through fake contracts and shell companies. Millions disappearing while the public face shone immaculate. A transcript from a secret interview Daniel had conducted with one of Ryan's old friends. One line circled twice in red ink. Ryan said he was done protecting his father. Beneath it, he planned to go to the authorities. And then, he told me, if anything happens to me, people should look at Richard. 3 weeks later, Ryan was dead. At the bottom of the cabinet, a newspaper clipping from 6 months after the crash. Richard Carter, smiling outside a courthouse. Business leader cleared of all allegations. Every investigation had quietly dissolved. Witnesses stopped cooperating. Evidence disappeared. Cases dropped so gently they barely made a sound. My husband hadn't been hiding an affair. He had been hiding a war. The deeper I went, the more clearly I understood Grace. Not as a rival. As a victim. She had tried to speak publicly about what happened that night. Every attempt was dismantled. Lawyers withdrew. Witnesses changed their stories. She eventually stopped, not because she accepted the official story, but because she was afraid. The money Daniel sent was for legal expenses. Medical costs. Living expenses during years when her life had been derailed by what happened. Daniel had been supporting her survival. I had spent months suspecting the worst about my husband. I had questioned his loyalty. Felt betrayed in the most personal way possible. I had been wrong. But the truth didn't make the pain smaller. It changed its shape. Daniel had kept this from me for 10 years. Built a wall between us brick by brick and called it protection. And in doing so, he made our marriage smaller than it could have been. I wasn't just grieving my husband anymore. I was grieving the version of us that might have existed if he'd ever just said, "Natalie, I need to tell you something." 2 days later I found the backup file. The original, complete voice note. I locked the front door. Drew the curtains. Sat at the kitchen table with both hands flat on the surface to stop them shaking. I pressed play. The beginning I already knew. The partial section I'd recovered. And then, for the first time, it continued. "Natalie, I should have trusted you." Tears came before I could prepare. I told myself I was protecting you. But keeping the secret didn't protect our marriage. It hollowed it out. Year by year. Until I couldn't tell anymore how much of it was real and how much was me performing the role of someone who hadn't lied to his wife for a decade. A pause. I could hear him breathing. Every lie was supposed to buy more time. Time to find proof. Time to come home one evening and sit down at the kitchen table and tell you everything, and watch you understand that it wasn't about betrayal. It was about justice. His voice dropped lower. The evidence is somewhere nobody would think to look. The maintenance building at the cemetery. Inside the old antique cabinet. There's a compartment. The Carter family cemetery. A place I'd visited a dozen times and never truly examined. I only hope the truth reaches you before they do. The morning after I found that recording, someone broke into my house. The back window unlocked. My home office opened. The cabinet where I'd kept copies of Daniel's files, specifically, surgically emptied. Nothing else touched. Not a burglary. A message. I filed a police report. Then I put on my coat and drove to the cemetery. The maintenance building sat at the back of the property behind a stand of oak trees. I'd walked past it 100 times. Which was, of course, the entire point. The antique filing cabinet against the far wall. A compartment built into the back of the bottom drawer. Inside, a waterproof case. Inside the case, everything. Contracts. Emails. Financial records. Witness statements. Recordings. Evidence gathered not by investigators who could be pressured, but by one stubborn, frightened, deeply flawed man who came out here alone every few months and added another layer to something slowly becoming irrefutable. Ryan had documented the fraud himself. He'd given copies to 3 people, one of whom was Grace, who kept them safe for a decade despite everything. I thought about Richard at the last Christmas dinner. Pouring wine. Laughing. Maya on his knee calling him Grandpa. I packed the case into my bag and walked out. I contacted a journalist Daniel had researched years ago as a possible ally, someone he'd never quite trusted enough to approach. I gave her everything. Within 2 weeks, the story ran. Then it ran everywhere. Former employees emerged. Old witnesses found courage. People who had carried small pieces of the truth for years suddenly understood they were part of a much larger picture. The wall had been maintained through isolation. Once it was public, the isolation collapsed. Richard Carter was arrested on a Tuesday morning. I watched from my living room. Richard, 71, somehow smaller than I'd always seen him, led in handcuffs past a bank of microphones. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt something quieter. Grief. Because the man in handcuffs had destroyed 2 of his sons in the same motion, one through death, one through a decade of secret torment. And I would spend the rest of my life wondering whether Daniel might have lived longer if he hadn't been carrying this alone. Ryan's case was officially reopened. New expert analysis. Testimony from witnesses silent for 10 years. The findings, the original investigation had been compromised. Critical evidence withheld. The official classification of the crash could no longer stand. Grace Holloway was formally cleared. I called her from a parking lot. Neither of us spoke for a long time. I thought I would die before anyone believed me. Daniel believed you. He was the only one. Nearly a year later, I went to Daniel's grave on a quiet Tuesday morning. I sat beside the headstone. Then I unlocked his phone, opened the voice note, and pressed play one final time. I listened all the way through. The confession. The regret. The exhausted love running through every sentence like a current he couldn't suppress. When it ended, I felt something unexpected. Not anger. Not grief. Understanding. Not forgiveness, not yet. You don't forgive someone for a decade of secrets in a morning. That takes time. It takes accepting, piece by piece, that a person can be both the one who loved you and the one who failed you, often at the same time. But understanding. He was afraid. Fear convinced him that keeping me out was the kindest thing he could do. He confused protection with distance. And paid for that confusion with the version of us we could have been. I placed the phone beside the flowers and rested my hand on the cold stone. I know now, I said. The wind moved. That was all. I stood and walked back through the cemetery, out into the gray morning light. Not free. Not yet. But finally walking in the right direction. Silence isn't protection. Daniel believed he was keeping me safe by keeping me out. But the secret didn't stay outside our marriage, it lived inside it, in every distracted dinner and every unexplained late night. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't a coward. He was a person who was afraid, and made the choice fear usually makes us make, handle it alone. You can love someone completely. Build a life with them, raise a child with them, believe you know them entirely. And still never really know them at all. I started this journey looking for answers about one voice note. I ended it uncovering a secret that had been buried for 10 years. Some truths break your heart. Others set you free. This one somehow did both. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's that silence can be just as dangerous as a lie. Daniel spent 10 years carrying a burden alone, and by the time the truth came out, it had already changed all of our lives forever. But at least now, the secret is gone, and so is the weight that came with it. Thanks for listening to my story.